Hi everyone, in this unit we are going to talk about acids and bases, as well as their profound applications wherever we look, from the dissolving of Berocca or Alka-Seltzer in water until the formation of stalactites and stalagmites in caves. Okay, so the applications of acids and bases really span into a lot of things in the industries, dissolution and extraction of metals until the pharmaceutical sciences. So, for this lecture, we will be examining acids and bases in terms of three different models. First is that of Arrhenius, next is from Bronsted-Lowry, and the third one is Lewis by G.N. Lewis. We are also going to identify the conjugates of acids and bases so that later on we will be able to determine the species present in a solution and we can carry out correct calculations and correct problem solving analysis once we encounter acids and bases.
You probably ate food with acids in it today and maybe washed the dishes with a base. There are some basic properties that will help you distinguish acids and bases from other chemicals. Acids have a sour or tart taste. Think of lemons or vinegar. That's the taste. Bases taste bitter, which is not a pleasant taste. If you've ever had soap in your mouth, you'll know the taste of a base. Both acids and bases will change color in the presence of an acid-base indicator. They both can be strong or weak electrolytes in solution, and they're both corrosive. Always check the safety information when working with acids and bases to make sure that you protect yourself and your clothing.
Okay, so what we have here are the basic properties of acids and bases. So how do we know qualitatively whether a substance is acidic or a substance is basic? All right, but it varies into different degrees. All right, so you can have strong acids and strong bases, while we can also have weak acids and weak bases. Now, weak acids are usually organic compounds. For example, the one in fruits. Okay, uh, you have citrus fruits like oranges, lemons, they contain citric acid, while vinegar is 5% acetic acid. Commercial vinegar is acetic acid. Okay, these are examples of organic acids. So when we go into organic chemistry and talk about carboxylic acids, we will encounter and study their structures more. And acids also react with metals to produce hydrogen gas. Hydrogen gas is flammable. If you remember our lesson on the reaction of some metals as well. And they react with carbonates and bicarbonates to produce carbon dioxide gas. So this is the one responsible for cave formations. All right, or you can also think of them as the one responsible for sinkholes, where in the there will be some holes on the ground, okay, or a building collapses, maybe because the aqueous environment there has become too acidic and they react with the carbonates and bicarbonates of the minerals present on the ground. While for bases, they have a bitter taste. So one example is common soap. Okay, if ever you have tried tasting soap by accident, and then they feel slippery to the touch, and many soaps contain bases, as what has been mentioned. Okay, so we are able to know in terms of chemical formula whether a substance is an acid or a base due to the presence of hydrogen at the start of the chemical formula. So for example, here you have hydrochloric acid represented by HCl, nitric acid, which is HNO3, that's H plus reacting with the nitrate ion, and then sulfuric acid, which has two hydrogen atoms attached to the sulfate ion, and the list goes on. All right. Now, take note that there are also strong and weak acids. When you say strong acids, these are the acids that ionize completely into H plus, okay, and the other component, an ion, A minus. So, for example, you have HCl. When hydrogen chloride is dissolved in water, you end up with H plus ion and the Cl minus ion. That is an example of a strong acid, and by the way, strong acids are also strong electrolytes. Weak acids, on the other hand, they do not completely dissociate. So, if you mix them with water, you are still able to see uh, the the parent material. So for example, you have Hb being dissolved in water, then you can still partly see molecules of the Hb acid. Hb could be anything, okay? And that is why we have different models of acids and bases, because earlier they thought of acids as really the chemicals that have H plus at the beginning and then it dissociates, but it's not true anymore. Okay, so in this part of the lecture we are going to listen and learn how acids and bases are described in different models. So first one is the Arrhenius model. The Arrhenius says that acids produce H plus ions in a solution, while bases produce OH ions. So examples of bases are the hydroxide, sodium hydroxide, magnesium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide. Okay, but there is one caveat for that. Uh, so we have here an illustration of an Arrhenius acid being able to produce H plus. By the way, H plus is just a kind of a misnomer because its complete chemical formula is this one, H3O plus. So for example, you have this substance HCl. Once it donates its one hydrogen ion into water, then the water molecule becomes H3O plus. Okay, but scientists just like to write this as the H plus ion. Okay, and then the partner, the one that has been left, is your Cl. So in here, anything that has produced H plus or H3O plus in water is considered to be an acid. Meanwhile, those substances that produce OH in water, so for example, you place in there NH3, ammonia, and you mix it with water, the ammonia molecule abstracts, okay, or gets one of the hydrogens of water in order to form the ammonium ion, NH4 plus, and thereby producing OH minus. Okay, so that is the definition of an Arrhenius acid and Arrhenius base. Okay, so normally we just write H plus instead of H3O plus for an Arrhenius acid. Now, take note that acids that release one hydrogen ion are called monoprotic or are considered monoprotic. Uh, the, pro- the protic part here represents proton, right? Because an H plus, a hydrogen stripped off its one electron, is basically a proton. Okay, so if it's an acid that releases one hydrogen ion, then we call it a monoprotic acid. If they release two, they are called diprotic, while if they are releasing three, okay, H3PO4, those kinds of polyatomic acids, no, they release three hydrogen ions, then they are considered to be triprotic. All right, so let's do a little learning check. You have here different species, different substances. Identify whether it is an acid or a base. Okay, 2 minutes, you may pause this video. So for HF, that is an acid, and HNO3 is also an acid. Rubidium hydroxide It's very obvious. Is OH is an OH producing species, so it's a base, and then H2SO4, that's sulfuric acid, and barium hydroxide is a base. All right. So if it's an acid, diba, it releases protons. So HF is monoprotic, HNO3 is monoprotic, H2SO4 is diprotic. Okay, we do not consider rubidium hydroxide and barium hydroxide because they are not acids. They do not produce H plus ions in water, right? But there's a problem with Arrhenius. Okay, the Arrhenius theory works very well to explain the behavior of most acids and bases in a solution, with some important exceptions. Remember the example we had a while ago, NH3, right? It produces an OH minus, however, it doesn't have an OH in its chemical formula. Okay, so that is why another model evolved.
The Arrhenius definition, it turns out, is too confining for all acids and bases. For example, ammonia is basic, but there's no hydroxide on ammonia. In the presence of water, however, it will react to produce hydroxide from the water molecule. So there is another way to define acids and bases. The Bronsted-Lowry definition is that acids are hydrogen ion donors and bases are hydrogen ion acceptors. It's a broader definition. So all Arrhenius acids and bases are also Bronsted-Lowry acids and bases, but not all Bronsted-Lowry acids and bases are Arrhenius. When you look at an acid-base reaction, you'll notice that a double arrow is often used. This implies that the reaction is actually reversible. It can occur in both directions. In this reaction, the ammonia is the base, because it's the hydrogen acceptor. By default, then, the water is acting as an acid because it will be the hydrogen donor. But when we look at the other side of the equation, we could imagine it going to the opposite direction, where ammonium ion would donate the proton and hydroxide would accept. We call these the conjugate acid and the conjugate base. A conjugate acid is the particle that's formed when a base gains a hydrogen ion. And a conjugate base is the particle that remains when an acid has donated a hydrogen ion. They will always be paired like this because it's a reversible reaction.
Alright, so according to the video, a new model has evolved, pinpointing or trying to remediate the problem with the Arrhenius definition. So we have now the Bronsted-Lowry acids and bases. And take note, as a review, acids are proton donors while bases are proton acceptors. Okay, and there is a new set of terminologies that will be added once we have that. Okay. So again, remember that a Bronsted-Lowry acid is a proton donor. Bronsted-Lowry base is a proton acceptor. So just in the case with ammonia, okay, once it reacts with water, the reaction is reversible, meaning after ammonia reacted with water to form the ammonium ion and the OH ion, these products here can act as the reactants and they can go back to being H2O and NH3. Now this concept is what we call a reversibility, okay, or reversible reactions. Okay, some chemicals do that. After being formed as products, they have the tendency to go back into their original form. All right, and there's another whole study or a unit for this, which we call chemical equilibrium. But let's reserve that for later or higher chemistry. But for now, we accept the fact that ammonia is a weak base, okay, partly because of its reversibility. Now, we have a new set of words or terminologies that has sprung from the Bronsted-Lowry model, and those are our conjugate acid and conjugate base. So we call this the conjugate acid base pair. When you say conjugate, diba? When you say conjugal property, that is the property of a husband and wife. So it's like a partnership. Okay, it's a partnership. So that means once the acid has once the acid has released its hydrogen, okay, or has released its proton, then the partner of the conjugate acid or the species has now become a conjugate base. Okay, it it became a lacking of protons. So then it is now ready to accept protons to become an acid once again. All right. So you see the partnership in terms of the base. Okay. Remember that a base is a proton acceptor. Okay, according to Bronsted and Lowry. So if the base has already accepted the proton, just like this one, then it becomes a conjugate acid, meaning it has the ability to release that a hydrogen or to release that proton back, okay, so that it will become a base once again. All right. So in here, the partner of the acid is a conjugate base. The partner of a base is a conjugate acid. Now, conjugate base is everything that remains of the acid after a proton is lost. So for example, in here we have the violet and the blue smaller circle here. Let's assume that this is HCl. All right. So if the HCl molecule has lost its uh, proton or its hydrogen atom, then we call that species our conjugate base already because it's now the one ready to accept the proton. The same thing goes with conjugate with the base and conjugate acid. So take note that the conjugate acid is formed when the proton is transferred to the base. So just like this one. Okay, so let's assume that this is water. Okay, so one proton or one hydrogen atom from the water molecule uh, has been or it has been added here. Okay, one proton or one hydrogen atom has been added to the water molecule. Okay, making it our conjugate acid because later on once the reaction reverses it will be the one to release na it will be the one that will be the acid, it will be the one to release the hydrogen atom.
Water is incredibly special for many reasons, and one of those is that it's amphoteric. It's able to act as both an acid and a base. If you break off one of the hydrogen atoms, you get a hydrogen ion and a hydroxide ion. The hydrogen ion would imply that water is an acid, and the hydroxide would imply that water is a base. And the truth is, it's both. Amphoteric. Pretty amazing.
So you have the questions regarding the diagnostic test. What does it mean to be amphoteric? So amphoteric means the ability to act as an acid and as a base. All right. So what we have just discovered now is that water, okay, water is both an acid and a base. All right, and then it is amphoteric. So, one important skill that we must practice in chemistry is to really identify the chemical species that we have. So, in your module, you have there a let's practice a portion, okay, wherein you are asked for what the conjugate base is for the given acids and what the conjugate acid is for the given bases. Now, it's important for us to know that the definition of acids and bases. So in here, it's just very easy. All you need to remember is that you have to know what acids are. So take note that usually acids have an H before their chemical formula, all right, at the start of the chemical formula. So when you say conjugate base, okay, remember that the conjugate base is the partner of the acid. Okay, it is the species wherein the hydrogen has been removed. Okay, and then in terms of bases, remember that bases here do not have their H plus, but when you say conjugate acid of the base, it is where the hydrogen has been incorporated already to their structure. So let's do this one by one. This is a perchloric acid, HClO4. What do you think is the conjugate base of perchloric acid? Meaning, what is the species once it has released its hydrogen? If you're thinking ClO4 minus, then you're right. All right. So the conjugate base of perchloric acid is ClO4 minus. Okay, it's the species wherein all the hydrogens of HClO4 has been removed. Now let's go to finding the conjugate acid of the following base. So I think this one came out of the diagnostic test, Cn minus. Right? So take note that this is a species that is ready to accept a hydrogen ion. Okay, and then this is a base, so we are asked what the conjugate acid is. So what could be the conjugate acid of the cyanide ion? If you are thinking HCN, then you're correct. Okay, so we have here the uh, our line of thinking. So we are asked to give the conjugate base for each of a series of species and to give the conjugate acid for each of the other series. Okay, so this is B. Take note that the conjugate base of a substance is simply the parent substance minus one proton. Okay, just like what we did with perchloric acid. And the conjugate acid of a substance is the parent substance plus one proton, just like what we did with Cn minus. Okay, so here are now the answers. So for letter A, HClO4, we have the conjugate base of perchloric acid is ClO4 minus. All right. And the other conjugate bases, for example, H2S, so minus one proton, you have HS minus. PH4 plus, so you remove one hydrogen ion, it also loses the positive charge, okay? It loses the positive one charge, okay? So it becomes PH3. And then the bicarbonate ion becomes CO3 2 minus. Okay, it lost a positive one charge, so it became 2 minus in here. Now, in terms of the conjugate acids and bases, so we are already done with Cn minus. So SO4 2 minus, this is a base. Its conjugate acid is HSO4 minus. Okay, so that's one more hydrogen to the structure. Okay, and since you added one more hydrogen ion, then the charge, which was originally 2 minus, became minus 1 only. All right. And then in here for water, once you add an H plus ion, so you have H3O plus. Okay. And the same thing here. This is a base HCO3, the bicarbonate ion. But then if you add one more hydrogen ion, that becomes H2CO3, and you do not have the charge already because this has been offset by the okay, HSO3, F minus, PO4, and CO. And then you have it here. Just reflect on how these answers came to be. The last model or classification is the Lewis acid and the Lewis base. So a Lewis acid is a substance that can accept a pair of electrons, while a Lewis base is a substance that can donate a pair of electrons. Okay, so this is now in terms of whether the species can donate or accept an electron pair. So maybe a uh, helpful mnemonic for this if Lewis LAPE, okay, or LAAPE. So that's Lewis acid accepts a pair of electrons, LAAPE, and then the reverse, okay, Lewis base LB is the one that can donate, okay, DPE, APE, and LPE. So, for example, you have here going back to the hydrogen ion and the hydroxide ion. Once the hydroxide ion donates its pair of electrons to hydrogen and it finds another hydrogen ion to donate an electron pair again, then what we do have is water. All right, so that means our OH here, okay, and our OH donates an electron pair, so it is our base, while our acid, okay, the Lewis acid is the one that accepts the electron pair. Another example is this one, NH3 reacting with an H plus ion. So what happens here is that the electron pair from nitrogen is donated to the hydrogen ion. And so what we do have is NH4 plus, the ammonium ion. So in this reaction, H plus is our acid because it's the one that accepts, and NH3 is our base because it's the one that donates the electron pair. And we have just another example, BF3 and NH3. So what happens here is NH3 donates its pair of electron, and then therefore it is our base, while BF3 is our acid. Okay, and so take note that in this setup there is no proton that was donated or accepted. So notice how the development of the definition of acids and bases varies as time progressed. All right. So for our learning check, maybe in your notes um, you can make the following table. So what is an acid in Arrhenius view? What is an acid according to the Bronsted-Lowry model? And what is an acid or a base according to the Lewis model? Okay, so in summary, here are our keywords. So for Arrhenius, an acid is an H plus producer, while a base is a hydroxide ion producer. According to Bronsted-Lowry, an acid is an H plus or a proton donor, while a base is a proton acceptor. And for Lewis, an acid is an electron pair acceptor, EPA, and a base is an electron pair donor. All right. So why is this all important? Later on, we will be dealing with acid-base problems. So in analyzing, we'll have to really to consider what major species are present. Okay, does a reaction occur that can be assumed to go to completion? So we are now talking about a complete reaction or an irreversible reaction. But there are also those reversible reactions. Okay, and in your higher chemistry, you will have equilibrium. Okay, what equilibrium donates the solution, and then later on, you will have to analyze the problem. Okay, but that starts from knowing what major species are present. All right. So we spend the rest of our time reading through the module and getting ready for the next synchronous session. Okay, that ends our lecture for this time. Okay, I hope we're able to have or achieve our learning targets, which are to examine acids and bases in terms of the different models, and also identify the conjugates of acids and bases. An exercise that would practice this competency will be given after after this lecture. All right. So I hope you have a good day, everyone, and you may read now through the rest of the module.